Yeah.
बराबर चल रहा है भैया मेरे को लाइव कर
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So, welcome to the webinar on US tariffs and its impact on the Indian equity market. Now, last 3 to 4 months, we have all been bombarded with news on tariffs and counter tariffs. Every day, President Trump comes on Twitter or on the various forums and announces new tariffs or threats on multiple other countries. एंड इसके चलते हमने देखा है कि मार्केट्स में काफ़ी एक स्ट्रॉन्ग करेक्शन आया है एंड अक्रॉस एसेट क्लासेस मतलब इक्विटीज बॉन्ड्स करेंसीज कमोडिटीज सब में वॉलेटिलिटी बढ़ गई है तो इन टैरिफ्स का क्या रीज़न है व्हाई दे हैव बीन इम्पोज्ड ऑन ऑल दीज कंट्रीज and how to go about it in terms of stocks as well as the different sectors, what will be the impact on the various sectors. So we'll see one by one. So starting first with the why tariffs have been imposed or what is the purpose. So basically simple terms mein dekhe to it is just a tax on countries for all the goods and services that are imported from another country. So this is done by all the countries across the world. Even in India, you must have heard India imposing some import duty on edible oil or on other Chinese products to support the domestic industry. एंड बेसिकली यूएस में मेन रीजन है टू रेज द गवर्नमेंट रेवेन्यूज क्योंकि उनका बजट डेफिसिट बहुत ज़्यादा है तो प्रेसिडेंट ट्रम्प हैज़ डिसाइडेड दैट लेट्स इम्पोज टैरिफ्स also to shift the manufacturing base from China and other Asian countries to back to the US. So if you see in the 60s and 70s, there were many industries in the US. But now, post from the 80s, 90s, as China opened up to the economy, China ने अपना manufacturing strong किया है, तो naturally Chinese goods were cheap across the world, and इसका फायदा चाइना का हुआ है, and US में industries have died a slow death. So many industries have shut down in semi-urban towns and villages. Many jobs have been lost in the US. So on back. President Trump has decided to impose these tariffs. Now, how do tariffs work? So, I have my colleague Arnav Sane also over here. So, he'll explain the basics of how the tariffs work. Over to you, Arnav.
Hi, thank you, Sumit. So, good evening to all of you, and we'll go over how do tariff work. So, basic एकदम hypothetical example लिया है. So, एकदम basic example है एक टी-शर्ट है जो यूएस में आप बनाओगे तो $12 का बनता है. सेम टी-शर्ट इंडिया में बनाओगे लेबर या फिर आप बोलो रॉ मटेरियल्स चीपर मिलता है तो वो $10 में बनता है टी-शर्ट. तो बेसिकली $2 का डिफरेंस है. और जो इंडिया में मैन्युफैक्चरर्स है वो उस टी शर्ट को एक्सपोर्ट करे यूएस में और बेच रहे $10 में. ये एग्जांपल एकदम बेसिक. इसमें हम लोग ने बहुत अजम्पशंस लिया है कि कुछ ट्रैवलिंग का कॉस्ट नहीं है. जो आप यहाँ से टी शर्ट यूएस भेजोगे तो लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट कुछ नहीं है, ऊपर से प्रॉफिट मार्जिन वगैरह कुछ नहीं. एकदम बेसिक एग्जांपल है. फेस वैल्यू पे सिर्फ देखते हैं अपन. तो फिर जो $12 है तो जो इंडियन मैन्युफैक्चरर्स वहां पे भेज रहा है टी शर्ट, एक प्लेन ब्लू टी शर्ट है, वो यूएस में $10 का बिक रहा है और यूएस में टी शर्ट $12 का है. तो जैसे ये एज यू कैन एक्सपेक्ट द पीपल इन यूएस इफ दे आर प्राइस सेंसिटिव दे विल बाय द $10 वाला टी शर्ट. सो क्योंकि वो चीपर है तो लोग वहाँ पे क्वालिटी भी सेम है, सब सेम है, कलर मतलब जो A to Z लेके सब सेम है, सिर्फ प्राइस का फर्क है. तो ऑफ कोर्स द कंज्यूमर्स विल बाय द $10 वाला टी शर्ट विच इज कमिंग फ्रॉम इंडिया. उसके वजह से क्या हो रहा है कि यूएस में बने हुए टी शर्ट बिक नहीं रहे. तो यूएस क्या करता है टू गिव अ बूस्ट टू इट्स डोमेस्टिक इंडस्ट्री कि यूएस में बने हुए टी शर्ट्स बिके, जो ट्रम्प बोलता है MAGA, मेक अमेरिका ग्रेट अगेन. तो उसने क्या कर लिया, ट्रम्प ने अपने इंडिया के ऊपर 30% का टैरिफ डाल दिया. सो इंडियन अभी जो इंडियन टी शर्ट्स है वो जब इंडियन मैन्युफैक्चरर्स यूएस में एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे सो दोज टी शर्ट्स विल नाउ कॉस्ट $13. सो $10 प्लस 30% टैरिफ इज $13. एंड उसके वजह से क्या होगा, अभी यूएस में टी शर्ट्स जो है लोकल मेड वो $12 में बिक रहे हैं. सेम टी शर्ट अभी इंडिया से आ रहे वो $13 में बिक रहे. तो उसके वजह से क्या हो रहा है, डोमेस्टिक जो टी शर्ट्स है, मतलब यूएस में बने हुए जो टी शर्ट्स है वो चीपर है, एंड अगेन प्राइस सेंसिटिव होते हैं कंज्यूमर, ये सबको पता है. सो दे विल बाय द $12 वाला टी शर्ट, जिसके वजह से वापस ये आएगा. एक तो प्रोडक्शन को बूस्ट मिल रहा है, सेकेंड हो रहा है कि जो $3 एक्स्ट्रा वो गवर्नमेंट के पॉकेट में जा रहा है. सो जैसे हम लोग ने पिछले स्लाइड में देखा था, ये रीजन, इसके ऐसे टैरिफ्स काम करते हैं. वील गो टू द नेक्स्ट.
So yeah, thanks Arnav. So as Arnav explained and as also highlighted in the introduction, so the main plan behind the tariffs is to increase the tax revenue. Now what this will do is ये budget deficit को US में कम करेगा, जिसके चलते US will have the money or will have the comfort to cut taxes. Taxes ये दोनों के लिए cut करेगा, for consumers as well as for companies. तो इसके चलते नेचुरली देयर विल बी अ बूस्ट इन कंजम्पशन एज पीपल का डिस्पोजेबल इनकम बढ़ेगा, एंड पोस्ट दिस एज कंजम्पशन इंक्रीजेस नेचुरली द imports of these goods also will increase in the near term till there is sufficient domestic manufacturing capacity, and so this wheel will just go about every month in a similar way. This is the assumption of the US administration. It's not going to work exactly as per plan because cost इतनी near term में cost इतनी बढ़ने वाली है US में that naturally market participants are expecting a drop in the consumption in the US. So ultimately जो tax revenue आएगा that will also be lower as compared to the estimate. So estimate is around $600 billion that US is expecting, but it will be on the lower side. Coming to the tariff rates, so just to give first a background, on 2nd April, President Trump announced the reciprocal tariff rate for each country, जिसमें इंडिया पे 26% है, काफ़ी ईस्ट एशियन कंट्रीज पे हायर है, तो 46% ऑन वियतनाम, 37% ऑन बांग्लादेश. चाइना ऑब्वियसली वी नो विथ लगातार रेट बढ़ाते जा रहे हैं, तो हैज़ नाउ रीच्ड 245%, एंड कंट्रीज सच एज यूरोपियन यूनियन पे 20% है, एंड एक बेसलाइन टैरिफ है. तो जिनका यूएस के साथ ट्रेड डेफिसिट ज़्यादा नहीं है या सरप्लस में है, तो उन कंट्रीज पे एक बेसिक बेसलाइन टैरिफ ऑफ 10% इम्पोज किया है. तो इसमें ब्राज़ील एंड अदर लैटिन अमेरिकन कंट्रीज, यूएई, सऊदी अरेबिया और सब मिडल ईस्टर्न कंट्रीज, टर्की, ये सब कंट्रीज को सिर्फ 10% का रेट है, जबकि इंडिया पे 26% है. अब लास्ट वीक प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप ने इन टैरिफ्स पे एक पॉज लगाया है फॉर 90 days. सो फॉर द नेक्स्ट 90 days स्टार्टिंग 9th April to 9th July, he has given an exemption. So these additional tariffs will not apply. Only the 10% rate will apply on all the imports from these countries, except China. So China will continue to attract this high rate of 245%, and which continues to change practically every day. So this 245% also, this was raised just 2 days back. So there is a lot of uncertainty. And how these rates were calculated, so I'll ask Arnav to take us through this.
So the way these rates calculated is a little bit unconventional. Like generally tariffs ऐसे calculate नहीं होते. तो जो ट्रम्प, ये यूएस प्रेसिडेंट ट्रम्प है, उन्हें अपने ट्रेड डेफिसिट कम करना है with other countries. What he has done is a simple example of India. तो जो यूएस हमारे इंडिया के साथ ट्रेड करता है, तो यूएस का ट्रेड डेफिसिट यूएस के टर्म्स में है $49.5 billion. मतलब अगर ये मतलब यूएस का डेफिसिट है, इंडिया सरप्लस पे है, यूएस डेफिसिट है, तो वो है $49 billion का डेफिसिट. और हमारा रिपोर्ट जो यूएस इंडिया से जाता है वो है $91.4 billion. तो इन्होंने जो ये एग्जांपल के लिए है, राइट में आप देख सकते हो, एक हमने फॉर्मूला दिया. तो जो ट्रेड डेफिसिट है कंट्री का, इंडिया का है $48.5 billion डिवाइडेड बाय $91.2 billion, जो परसेंटेज आता है वो है वो एक्चुअली का वो टैरिफ. उन्होंने डिस्काउंट टैरिफ या स्वीपर टैरिफ बोला था जब अनाउंस किया था ट्रम्प ने. दैट टाइम they had done तो डिस्काउंट बोलने के लिए उन्होंने डिवाइडेड बाय 2 करके the rate that was there at was 26%. Similarly, वियतनाम आप देखोगे तो 129.4% का डेफिसिट है यूएस का, उसके सामने वो टोटल इम्पोर्ट है 142.5%. तो उसके हिसाब से आप कैलकुलेशन करोगे यही फॉर्मूला से तो आपका आंसर अराउंड 45-46% के आसपास आएगा. सो ऐसे ही ये टैरिफ रेट्स डिराइव हुए थे जो सेकंड अनाउंस हुए थे. सो ये टैरिफ्स में थे ओवरऑल कंट्री लेवल पे थे, लेकिन इसमें कुछ कमोडिटीज है या फिर कुछ गुड्स है जो एग्जेम्प्ट, लाइक कॉपर है, फार्मा प्रोडक्ट्स है जो दवाई यूएस में जाती है, जेनरिक्स हो, एपीआईज हो, वो सब है. सेमीकंडक्टर्स है, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स है, लेकिन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स में भी चाइना के ऊपर जो स्मार्टफोन्स है उस पे टैरिफ्स अभी भी लागू है. दे आर द 245% दे स्टिल हैव टू पे चाइना. और फोटोवोल्टिक सेल्स है जो पीवी सेल्स होते हैं सोलर में यूज होते हैं वो. एंड फिर ये बुलियन, एनर्जी और मिनरल्स. तो यूएस प्रेसिडेंट ने वापस क्या किया कि जो कमोडिटीज यूएस खुद प्रोड्यूस नहीं करता है, जैसे बुलियन हो गया, फिर मिनरल्स हो गया, तो उसके ऊपर जो यूएस प्रोड्यूस नहीं करता उसके ऊपर वो लोग ने टैरिफ नहीं लगाए, क्योंकि वो ऑलरेडी महंगे, मतलब यूएस खुद प्रोड्यूस नहीं करता तो उनके पास कोई एडवांटेज नहीं है. तो उन्होंने अपना खुद का एडवांटेज कम नहीं किया, वो लोग ने वो इस पे बिना टैरिफ लगे. और अलग से जो कॉपर, फार्मा, सेमीकंडक्टर्स और ये है, इन पे आगे जाके अनाउंसमेंट आने वाली है. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट वी विल बी सीइंग न्यूज में, तो आप देख ही रहे हो कि फार्मा पे बोला था, फार्मा और सेमीकंडक्टर्स पे हम लोग सबसे ज्यादा टैरिफ लगाने वाले, कि नेवर सीन बिफोर टैरिफ्स लगने वाले. तो आप ये आगे जाके इसका भी अनाउंसमेंट आएगा. सो वी विल हैव टू वॉच आउट फॉर दीज टू चेक क्या टैरिफ्स आ रहे हैं.
Yeah, thanks, Arnav. So, coming to one exemption that has been given to Canada and Mexico by the US, and this is on back of the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. तो ये agreement काफी पुराना है. Earlier it was called NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. अब इसको rebrand किया है. तो इसमें जो भी रॉ मटेरियल्स या जो भी प्रोडक्शन इन तीन कंट्रीज में होता है, तो दे आर एग्जेम्प्ट फ्रॉम any import duties across all the three countries. And इसमें भी काफ़ी conditions है, as you can see in the slide, where even if it is not coming from these three countries, coming from outside, say from China or India, but if substantial manufacturing is done either in US, Canada or Mexico, then these products are exempted from any tariffs. So this agreement, ये agreement अभी भी है in spite of all these reciprocal tariffs. तो जो भी products classified है इस act के अंदर, तो उन पे zero tariff है. और जिन पे नहीं है, जो प्रोडक्ट्स कनाडा और मेक्सिको से यूएस आ रहे हैं बट इस यूएसएमसीए एक्ट में नहीं है, उन पे 25% टैरिफ है अभी भी, मतलब देयर इज नो एग्जेम्पशन फॉर इट. तो नेचुरली एक प्लान प्रेसिडेंट ट्रम्प का है, नॉट जस्ट टू शिफ्ट प्रोडक्शन टू यूएस बट ऑल्सो टू नेबरिंग कंट्रीज ऑफ मेक्सिको, especially in automobiles, where there will be advantage for US companies compared to the other imports from Europe or Japan. So coming to the why President Trump is so focused on China, तो naturally China US का largest trading partner है. अगर imports देखें तो 2024 में ये वैल्यू $439 billion पे था, एंड इसके सामने एक्सपोर्ट्स दैट इज फ्रॉम यूएस टू चाइना सिर्फ $144 बिलियन था. तो एक $300 बिलियन जितना एक ट्रेड डेफिसिट है चाइना के साथ. So China has clearly exploited US in the last 20 years in terms of the manufacturing. And almost 25% of the trade deficit is contributed by China. सेकेंड यूरोप है, इसके बाद मेक्सिको, वियतनाम एंड ताइवान. तो ये टॉप 5 कंट्रीज ही ऑलमोस्ट 50% कंट्रीब्यूट करते हैं यूएस के ट्रेड डेफिसिट को. तो नेचुरली इन कंट्रीज पे फोकस रहा है यूएस गवर्नमेंट का विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द रेसिप्रोकल टैरिफ्स. इंडिया इसमें काफ़ी नीचे है. तो हाल ही में रिसेंटली ओनली देयर हैज़ बीन एन इंक्रीज इन द एक्सपोर्ट्स फ्रॉम इंडिया टू यूएस. अदरवाइज इट वाज नॉट मच ऑफ issue with India also. So अभी भी लास्ट ईयर 24 में इट वाज जस्ट 4%. तो इंडिया इज रिलेटिवली इंसुलेटेड एज ऑल्सो सीन इन दी टैरिफ रेट जो हम पे इम्पोज हुआ है. तो इट इज नॉट मच कंपेयर टू दी अदर एशियन कंट्रीज. इन टर्म्स ऑफ प्रोडक्ट वाइज देखे क्या सबसे ज्यादा इंपोर्ट होता है यूएस में, तो नेचुरली फार्मास्यूटिकल प्रोडक्ट्स है which is almost 8% of the total imports and a large value $250 billion. तो naturally प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप ने इस पे अभी कोई टैरिफ नहीं लगाया है. पैसेंजर कार्स अगेन यूरोप, जापान, कोरिया, Mexico, these are the major sources of imports for passenger cars. Almost 50% cars are imported into the US. Then crude oil have auto components as well as computers and other electronic items. So these are again largely imported from China, Taiwan. एंड एक्सपोर्ट्स अगर देखें तो क्रूड ऑयल अब यूएस एक नेट एक्सपोर्टर बन गया है. तो एज इंडिया ने भी इंडिकेट किया है कि फ्यूचर में इंडिया विल सोर्स मोर क्रूड ऑयल फ्रॉम द यूएस टू सेटिस्फाई द गवर्नमेंट ओवर देयर एंड sign a trade deal with the US. So again, exports, it is basically high technology exports out of the US. Coming to this fight that is going on between the world's two largest economies, so US and China almost contribute 50% or more than 50% of the world GDP. And it started just a week after President Trump came into office. It started with a 10% tariff on China. Then China responded by targeting only certain commodities. And then from, as we have seen, अप्रैल से अगर देखें तो जब रेसिप्रोकल टैरिफ्स लगाए तब से लेके अभी विद इन 2 to 3 weeks there has been a sharp rise in the tariff rate. And China ने भी respond किया है, not both through tariff as well as non-tariff measures like asking Chinese airlines not to buy planes from Boeing. तो directly आप US की एक major company को impact कर रहे हो. तो नेचुरली ये नॉन टैरिफ मेजर्स भी आगे जाके एक टाइप ऑफ स्लो डाउन ला सकता है ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी में. Coming to the impact of tariffs, so especially on India now, so there would be various impacts. तो एक impact रहेगा direct route, where India अगर example apparel या footwear export कर रहा है US को, तो naturally अगर US consumer demand impact हो रहा है तो there will be a drop in exports. Or if say India remains at 25% post these 3 months of pause, and Vietnam somehow signs a deal and comes straight to 10%, so there will be a natural disadvantage for India over there. Then second एक impact रहेगा indirect या proxy route से. तो से एक ऑटो कंपोनेंट इंडिया से यूरोप जा रहा है जहाँ पे वो असेंबल होके गाड़ी में फिक्स होके दैट कार इज फाइनली गोइंग टू द यूएस. तो अगर यूएस में ही एक्सपोर्ट नहीं हो रहा है फ्रॉम यूरोप से, जेएलआर ने अभी अनाउंस किया है कि अप्रैल मंथ में वो एक भी कार एक्सपोर्ट नहीं करेगा टू द यूएस. तो जो भी कंपोनेंट सप्लायर्स है टू जेएलआर दे विल गेट इम्पैक्टेड. एंड थर्ड इज डंपिंग इन अदर मार्केट्स. तो now China is facing this 250% tariff. It will divert its products to other countries, especially to Southeast Asia, Africa, and other European countries. And Indian exports to these regions will have to compete with China. तो say अभी $100 पे कोई चीज इंडियन कंपनी वहाँ पे बेच रही है, that will naturally realization will come down to $50 or $60. So that will be a major impact on exporters, especially from India. बात करें इंडिया का जो ट्रेड है विद द यूएस, तो about 18% of Indian exports go to the US. and इंडिया का यूएस के साथ एक ट्रेड सरप्लस है. तो there will be an impact, especially auto components, pharmaceuticals. These are the major commodities that get exported to the US. In terms of imports, इतना नहीं है, just 6.2%, but ये भी government is trying to increase so that the trade gap narrows with the US and we get a favorable deal. Coming to the top 10 exports to the US, so pharmaceutical products is the largest. Then again, we have started now exporting smartphones, other telecom components. Gems and jewelry is another major sector, as also the textile apparel as well as the iron and steel products. These are some of the major exports to the US. Coming to the impact on sectors, so I'll ask Arnav to first highlight the pharmaceuticals impact, and then we'll move on ahead.
सो इन टर्म्स ऑफ फार्मा सेक्टर आप देख सकते हैं कि इंडिया का जो एक्सपोर्ट्स जाता है उसका इंडिया का एक्सपोर्ट्स का 53% गोज टू यूएसए और इंडिया जैसे अभी कोविड के बाद में इट इज नोन एज द फार्मेसी ऑफ द वर्ल्ड एंड इंडिया का एक मेजर एक्सपोर्ट टू द यूएस इज जेनरिक ड्रग्स विच आर नेम ब्रांड ड्रग्स होते हैं जो ओरिजिनल ड्रग होता है उसका एक कॉपी होता है फर्स्ट कॉपी नहीं बोल सकते बट दे आर द सेम ड्रग एंड वो जेनरिक ड्रग होता है जो वहां पे यूएस में जो ओरिजिनल ड्रग है उसे सस्ते में मिलता है सो उसके वजह से इंडिया का एक्सपोर्ट फार्मा एक्सपोर्ट्स टू यूएस बहुत बड़ा है और इंडिया वापस वो जेनरिक के वजह से इट इज नोन एज द फार्मेसी ऑफ द वर्ल्ड सो आर शेयर टू यूएस इज 53%. सो इंडिया का जो भी फार्मा एक्सपोर्ट होता है उसका 53% यूएस में जाता है तो उसका पहले जो टैरिफ रेट था वो 1.3% था एकदम बेसिक मिनिमम था और अभी जो है जैसे हम लोग ने पहले कवर किया है अभी एग्जेम्प्ट है तो अभी भी इफेक्टिव टैरिफ है 1.3%. तो इसके हिसाब से आप देखोगे तो जो फार्मा स्टॉक्स है जो यूएस सेंट्रिक फोकस्ड है लाइक सन फार्मा हो गया लुपिन हो गया सिप्ला हो गया वो सब फोकस में रहेंगे क्योंकि अगर जाके कल ट्रम्प बड़े ही जैसे इम्पैक्टफुल बहुत बड़ा कुछ टैरिफ अनाउंसमेंट कर सकता है तो ये प्रेशर के अंडर आ सकते हैं लेकिन अगर उसके सामने अगर इसने नहीं इतना बड़ा कोई अनाउंसमेंट किया कि टैरिफ 1.3% से बढ़ा के 10% या 15% ही किया क्योंकि यूएस हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम का एक बहुत बड़ा पार्ट है इंडियन फार्मा जो जेनरिक्स जाता है तो उसकी वजह से मे बी अगर उसने कम किया सो ये स्टॉक्स ये बहुत अच्छा हो सकता है इन स्टॉक्स के लिए.
Thank you, Arnav. And coming to the next sector, that is textiles and apparel. So this is where almost 37% of the exports go to the US. And इसमें अगर देखें तो एक बांग्लादेश का भी एंगल है जिसमें रेडीमेड गारमेंट्स में बांग्लादेश का एक बड़ा शेयर है एंड यान जो कॉटन से बनता है वो यान इंडिया से पहले बांग्लादेश जाता है एंड देन it gets converted into garments and then goes to the US and other European countries. So trade between India and Bangladesh also has gone down in the last 3 to 4 months or 6 months you can say because of the unrest over there in Bangladesh. So that has also impacted and majorly दूसरा एक चीज है कि इंडियन टेक्सटाइल कंपनीज उनका कैपेसिटी इज नॉट दैट हाई तो एनी स्पेयर कैपेसिटी है वो अभी इंडियन कंपनीज ग्रेजुअली बढ़ा रहे हैं तो लुकिंग एट this impact of higher tariffs on other countries will flow into our companies gradually. It will not be an immediate impact for the textile and apparel sector. Gems and jewelry, again, we are a major player. 37% of the exports go to the US. And if there is slowdown in the US, especially consumption slowdown अगर है तो naturally ये sector impact होगा. Smartphones again we are 37% of our exports go to the US and इसमें Dixon Technologies एक major player है तो Samsung, Motorola these are the main customers of Dixon and Dixon manufactures the phones for these companies and then ये export होते हैं US में and अगर चाइना एंड वियतनाम पे ये टैरिफ रेट हम अज्यूम कर रहे हैं कि अगर ये हाई टैरिफ रेट अगर रहता है तो नेचुरली इंडिया को एक ऑलमोस्ट 15 to 20% का एडवांटेज रहेगा. ऑटो कंपोनेंट्स अगेन ये सब ऑटो कंपोनेंट्स जो यूएस को एक्सपोर्ट होते हैं दे आर क्रूशियल कंपोनेंट्स सो net there will not be major impact in terms of it getting replaced by other countries but हाँ अगर कार्स ही कम प्रोड्यूस हो रही है यूएस में या यूएस में कार्स एक्सपोर्ट कम हो रही है फ्रॉम यूरोप then naturally companies such as Bharat Forge, Samvardhan Motherson, Tata Motors जिनको almost 30 to 40% volumes and revenue आते हैं यूएस से they will get impacted. Coming to chemicals, so again there will be an advantage over here as the tariff rate with China is relatively lower for India. तो certain segments में ये benefit करेगा. We'll have to see how it impacts other markets also, because अगर China ज़्यादा chemicals dump कर रहा है, especially in Europe and Asia, तो इंडियन कंपनीज के रियलाइजेशंस भी प्रेशर में आ जाएंगे. तो वील हैव टू हैव अ वेट एंड वॉच अप्रोच एज फार एज केमिकल्स आर कंसर्न. फोटोवोल्टाइक्स जो सोलर सेल एंड मॉड्यूल होते हैं, तो अभी एक छोटा प्लेयर है इंडिया इन टर्म्स ऑफ यूएस में एक्सपोर्ट करना, बट ऑलमोस्ट जो भी इंडिया एक्सपोर्ट करता है सोलर सेल्स एंड मॉड्यूल्स, दे मेनली गो टू द यूएस. Agriculture and aquaculture, so again shrimps and rice, these are the main commodities in the, at least from a listed universe perspective, where there will be impact. So negative impact in shrimps if the current tariff rates hold, as Ecuador will be a major country to replace Indian exports, and in terms of rice we'll be at an advantage. And steel and aluminum, we are not major players. Only thing is, if China starts dumping steel and aluminum in other countries, so it will impact the global prices and the realizations. So let's go one sector by sector. So coming first to textiles and apparel. So as I highlighted that India's share in US imports is still lower compared to China, Vietnam, and even Bangladesh, where we are at a par. And if you look at the new tariff rates, assuming that these rates hold, so India will be at a huge advantage, because China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, basically all other competitor countries are getting taxed at a higher rate. Only thing is, demand should hold in the US, as well as the capacity utilization at the Indian companies. So Indian companies अपने आप capacity कितना fast increase करते हैं, इस पे भी dependent रहेगा companies का performance. Coming next to smartphones, again, India will be at an advantage compared to China and Vietnam. Already there are news reports suggesting that Apple will increase the production out of India to supply to the US. So smartphones globally also, again, as I highlighted, Motorola and Samsung, Dixon Technologies already manufactures for them. And both companies have also highlighted they are going to increase the share of Indian production. So again, we are at an advantage over here. Coming to the shrimp sector, that is companies such as Avanti Feeds, Apex Frozen Foods. For these companies now, again, it will depend on what the final tariff rates are. But currently, we are at a slight disadvantage because Ecuador is geographically closer to the US and also at a lower rate. So this will impact Indian shrimp producers. Also, India में इसका consumption इतना है नहीं, तो अगर US से demand कम होता है, तो naturally there will be a pressure on the pricing as also the overall demand. So this sector could be under pressure in the near term. Agriculture, coming to rice. So again, rice, we are at a benefit when compared to Thailand and China. And Indian rice is also consumed by Indians living in the US. So pricing का इतना impact नहीं रहेगा, because it is food which is consumed, and naturally people have certain tastes and sensitivities. So that impact again would not be there much. Chemicals, as I said, that we have a huge opportunity over here to increase our share and exports to the US, but it will also depend on what the capacity utilization of the Indian companies are, and how China reacts in other markets. Also, certain companies that supply to the pharma sector or to the battery sector, that is the EV batteries, they have a long-term contracts, and companies won't change these contracts just because of tariffs or just because of any other trade development. So the demand over there won't be that much. That is, impact won't be there. So net positive impact, but with a cautious approach, as we'll have to see for the first 3 to 4 months how China reacts, because China has a major capacity. Almost 25 to 30% of the global capacity in many chemicals is with China. Coming to gems and jewelry, here we'll be at a slight disadvantage because European countries, especially Belgium, will be at an relatively attractive rate. And overall consumer demand अगर US में कम होता है तो there will be an impact on the jewelry sector. So these are the impact on the major macro parameters which FIIs also track while investing across the globe. And ये हमने Jan से April अभी तक लिया है the historical price. Just to highlight, when President Trump ऑफिस में जब भी चार्ज लिया तब से लेके जब भी टैरिफ्स अनाउंस हुए, स्पेशली ऑन 2 अप्रैल द रेसिप्रोकल टैरिफ्स, तो डॉलर इंडेक्स नेचुरली एक डिक्लाइन देखा है बिकॉज ग्लोबली सेफ हेवन डिमांड जो डॉलर में रहा करता था वो अब यूरो एंड येन जो स्टेबल करेंसीज है उसमें शिफ्ट हुआ है, एंड इट हैज आल्सो शिफ्टेड टू गोल्ड. तो इसके चलते यूएस 10 ईयर यील्ड में भी हमने स्टार्टिंग में गिरावट देखी, बट अगेन पोस्ट दैट एज चाइना डिसाइडेड दैट विल नॉट होल्ड the US treasuries as we would previously, there was a sharp spike in the last week or the week before that. And post that President Trump ने भी announce किया कि okay, let's give a 90-day pause, as it was becoming difficult for the US also to borrow more for their own requirements. अगर बात करें गोल्ड की तो गोल्ड नेचुरली एक सेफ हेवन है, एंड एज पीपल शिफ्ट आउट ऑफ यूएस ट्रेजरीज एंड इक्विटीज इनटू गोल्ड, तो gold has seen a sharp spike, especially in the last 10 days, and we are seeing gold continuously scaling new highs every day. And Brent crude, naturally, with the US demand also declining, and with recession expected in the next few months, crude prices have gone down. एक supply भी supply also has increased in the last few months, so that also has impacted the prices. So overall, if you see these 4 parameters, India is relatively better placed, and that's also explaining some of the FII inflows that we have started seeing in the last 3 to 4 days. What next? So key events to watch ahead from a market perspective will be the tariff relaxations. So 2 days back President Trump ने announce किया कि auto tariffs पे there will be some relaxation to help US companies like Ford and Stellantis. So any announcement on this will be viewed positively. फिर सेक्टरल टैरिफ्स पे क्या स्टैंस रहेगा, तो फार्मा, सेमीकंडक्टर्स, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स, इन सबको एक सेपरेट टैरिफ मिलने वाला है, जस्ट लाइक ऑटोमोबाइल्स एंड स्टील एंड एल्यूमिनियम पे है. तो फार्मा, इट विल बी नेगेटिव सेंटिमेंटली इन एट द बिगिनिंग, बट देन एज अर्नव हाईलाइटेड, फार्मा कंपनीज शुड बेनिफिट आउट ऑफ दिस टैरिफ अनाउंसमेंट. अगेन एंड ऑफ द 90-day सस्पेंशन पीरियड, तो जैसे जुलाई आएगा तो देयर विल अगेन बी अनसर्टनिटी. एक तो countries such as Japan, India, Korea, they are negotiating with the US, तो any trade deal अगर तब तक sign होता है and tariff rates come down, so those will be positive for the respective markets. But if there is not any deal and these tariffs come into effect, there could be countermeasures also announced by Europe or any other major country. US inflation में ये impact will start coming from September, October, because currently बहुत सारी कंपनीज ने इन्वेंट्री एक्यूमुलेट करके रखी है यूएस में अपने वेयर हाउसेज में. एप्पल ने भी मार्च में इंडिया से काफ़ी आईफोन्स एक्सपोर्ट करके रखे हैं. तो एज यूएस कंज्यूमर्स बाय दीज प्रोडक्ट्स फॉर इन द नेक्स्ट 3 to 6 months, these products will be at the old rate, which will not have a major impact on the inflation. जैसे ये टैरिफ्स लग जाएंगे जून जुलाई से वापस, एंड देन वील सी अ मेजर इम्पैक्ट इन सितंबर अक्टूबर. तो इसके चलते यूएस फेड में भी अनसर्टनिटी है. तो जेरोम पॉवेल ने कल ही बताया कि दे आर इन नो हरी टू कट रेट्स एनी टाइम इन द नियर टर्म. तो एक मार्केट में जो एक्सपेक्टेशन था दैट 2025 में भी देयर विल बी many rate cuts in the US, तो वो अब कहीं पे market discount करेगा कि there will be fewer than expected rate cuts. And finally, India is negotiating with US, also with EU and UK के साथ भी bilateral agreements expected है. So this will also impact imports into the US. So say segments like alcoholic beverages और for that matter cars, अगर ये products cheap होते हैं इंडिया में, तो Indian companies जो जिनका एक strong market है इंडिया, so they will have a sentimental negative impact in the near term. Coming so now with the globe in a high uncertain environment, so what should be the focus of the investors? So naturally focus on the domestic consumption theme. तो इसमें फैक्टर्स है कि इन्फ्लेशन अभी ऑलमोस्ट एट अ 67-month लो था मार्च में. So as inflation declines, there will be higher incomes with people to spend on. Also, the RBI is cutting rates 50 basis points already. We have done this year in the last 6 months, that is. And going ahead, also the RBI has indicated that the monetary policy will be accommodative. लास्ट बजट में जो टैक्स कट्स अनाउंस किए हैं वो इस साल से अब अप्रैल से स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे, तो नेचुरली द सैलरीज द take home income of people will go higher, and that will also be positive. So focus on the domestic themes and the sectors. Banks, we have seen a huge rally today also, and these banks look attractive. Similarly, power entirely domestic facing sector hai, and abhi summer season mein there is going to be high demand for power. Defense, we have seen in the last 1 month multiple orders, especially Bharat Electronics receiving orders across the board. Consumption may be FMCG as well as discretionary consumer sectors such as airlines, telecom. They will also benefit. Coming to cement, again a totally India focused sector, and construction is again picking up after a dull FY25. This year is again going to be good. So cement companies should also benefit. Healthcare, again hospitals will be more of a domestic facing sector only, and also many hospitals are expanding across India, which will add to their revenues. Infrastructure segment, maybe especially on the water front, so Vatek Vabag is one name. L&T KEC International in the transmission distribution space power sector, that will also continue to do well. Also in the auto and auto ancillary segment, companies which are focused on the Indian markets, so M&M hai, Swaraj Engines reported good set of numbers yesterday, TVS Motors, Lumax Autotech in the ancillary space, and Uno Minda. This company should do well in the near term. So that's it on this webinar today in terms of the information. We'll move on to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, kindly type it in the comment section, and we'll solve the queries. So we'll wait just a minute before the questions assemble. Yeah, so starting with the first question from Mr. Shyam Sundar regarding tariffs and safeguard duty on steel products, especially from China and Vietnam. So yes, you are right. The DGTR, which is the government organization that has suggested a 12% safeguard duty on imports of steel products. तो ये फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री नोटिफाई करेगा say within the next few weeks or months, and that will be beneficial for domestic steel companies. So we have seen a positive reaction also post that, as the pricing जो weak pricing environment था वो correct हो गया है, and we are seeing that prices have increased in the last few weeks. So yes, as far as so far as Chinese dumping is not there, even after the safeguard duty, if their cost is not lower, it will be beneficial for Indian steel companies. The next question will move to Mr. Harish. So he is asking on the impact of tariffs on Samvardhan Motherson and Tata Motors. So coming first on Tata Motors. So Tata Motors, we have seen a big decline. Naturally, the stock has reacted negatively to this tariff news in the last 2 to 3 months. इसका इम्पैक्ट है कि 25% ऑफ द वॉल्यूम्स कम फ्रॉम द यूएस फॉर जेएलआर एंड जैगुआर लैंड रोवर जेएलआर कंट्रीब्यूट्स ऑलमोस्ट 80 to 90% of the profits for Tata Motors. Domestic business भी is weak, facing competition from the new launches from M&M as well as the other companies such as Toyota. एंड कमर्शियल व्हीकल सेगमेंट में भी कंपटीशन बढ़ रहा है विद अशोक लेलैंड लॉन्चिंग न्यू प्रोडक्ट्स. सो नेचुरली देयर इज अ weak demand environment for Tata Motors. In the near term, at least the stock is expected to be under pressure till the tariff picture does not clear out, because JLR has no manufacturing plant in the US. So there will be still a negative impact we feel going ahead. The result will be out in the next few weeks, and post that one can take a call. Also on Samvardhan Motherson, now this is a global company with manufacturing facilities across the globe, and agar demand from the customers, that is customers such as say Mercedes Benz or JLR or any other global OEM, is not that strong, there will be an impact on Samvardhan Motherson as well, because it is more exposed to the global markets, not just to the US but to the Europe and Chinese markets as well. So in the near term, in the auto space, we suggest to stick to names which have a domestic focus. So M&M, Lumax Autotech, Uno Minda, which derive substantial revenues from India, focus on these companies in the auto and auto ancillary space. Next question is on IDFC First Bank. So the bank raised funds just yesterday, announced a fundraise through a preferential issue. Now, mid-cap banks are facing a lot of competition also from large banks as well as NBFCs. And we are seeing that deposit growth in the sector has not been strong. So, जो cheap source of funds रहता है banks के लिए from deposits, that is not that strong. So in terms of the preference, we are comfortable more on the large cap banks such as HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, which have also are showing signs of outperformance in this market. So advice is to stick to the large cap names such as HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank and ICICI Bank. Yeah. Next question is on DLF. So DLF, again, the real estate demand in the last few months was not that strong, mainly due to the market also correcting, which impacted the demand environment in the luxury real estate. Coming to in the future, so one positive is that rate cut cycle has started in India. So 50 basis points of cuts already done. That will benefit rate sensitive sectors, especially real estate. And the project pipeline also is pretty strong for DLF in the Delhi NCR market. So yes, DLF looks good at current levels. The stock has also given a decent correction and is a strong player in the Delhi NCR space. On Infosys, again, it would be largely an avoid. The result is due today. And from the numbers that we have seen in IT companies, that is TCS and Wipro, तो दोनों companies की commentary काफी weak रही है. Infosys again is a strong player in the US, especially to the banking and financial sector in the US. So there is an near-term negative impact. ये साल, that is FY26, is mostly going to be a washout, and only after that, as the things settle down on the tariff front, clients would start again spending on the technology spends. So near term, it is an avoid. Vari Energies, again, this company manufactures solar cells and solar modules. It also exports to the US. अब इस सेक्टर में भी देर विल बी वन इम्पैक्ट रहेगा कि चाइना से जो products आते हैं, that is the solar modules and solar cells, they could start getting dumped in India. India has high duties, high import duties on Chinese products, but if pricing environment जो है solar cells and modules में, अगर उसमें continuous correction अगर रहेगा, तो naturally there will be pricing decline for Vari Energies as well. In any case, the valuations also are high. So suggest to gradually enter in this stock, wait for the results, wait for the commentary that will be out in the next few weeks. There is one question on whether stock prices on certain sectors will increase or decrease on the basis of US market. So not on basis of the US market, but on what actions US takes, especially on the tariff front. So as I said, if pharma tariffs are imposed next week, or say any time, as President Trump has highlighted, so there will be an impact, a near-term negative impact. We have seen that with auto sector also. Auto companies which are focused more on the US and export markets, they have relatively underperformed compared to domestic-facing companies. And companies which are not exposed to the US, they will continue to do well, provided their numbers and earnings are also good. And the commentary also remains strong from these companies. Coming to the next question, so effect on PSUs in oil and gas company. Now there will be different impacts on different companies. तो एक रहेगा कि ONGC and Oil India जो companies oil and gas producers है, उन पे there could be a negative impact if the crude price stays at this $65 or even goes lower, because इनका realization directly impact होता है crude price से. But if you see oil marketing companies like IOC, BP and HP, उनके लिए benefit है क्योंकि marketing margins उनकी बढ़ जाएगी, and naturally there will also be a impact of so in near term at least the government has not directed these companies to cut the fuel prices, so they can enjoy these positive marketing margins at least in the near term. And also if the government tells these companies to cut the fuel rates for some time, there could be some pressure, but again it will depend on the marketing margins, which are pretty healthy at the moment for all the three oil marketing companies. So एक mixed impact रहेगा on oil and gas sector. Coming to which auto ancillary stock looks best to buy. So again, domestic facing themes like Lumax Autotech, Uno Minda, from a medium to long term perspective, these companies remain good. Also there is SJS Enterprises, which also supplies mainly to the domestic market. So domestic facing companies look good. A question on Bajaj Finserv. So again, Bajaj Finserv recently we saw Bajaj Group increasing their stake in the insurance joint ventures. So Allianz has decided to exit, and Bajaj Group will be taking complete control of both the life and general insurance ventures. And again, it's a pretty healthy company with decent return ratios, as well as all the regulatory ratios that are required in this sector. And Bajaj, the Bajaj twins, that is both Bajaj Finserv and Bajaj Finance, have a robust sales network as well. Only thing is competition is increasing slightly in the insurance sector with new players also entering. But overall, again, a domestic facing sector, and Bajaj Finserv should continue to do well. view on AU Small Finance Bank and Paras Defense. So AU Small Finance Bank, as I highlighted previously also with IDFC First Bank, small scale banks, that is mid cap and small cap banks, are relatively at not that well placed as compared to large cap banks, purely because of the cost of funds. So that will impact the margins in the near term, because uh, deposit raising the deposits is becoming difficult for these banks. So in the near term, kindly avoid stocks such as AU Small Finance Bank. Also इनका microfinance sector में भी exposure है, तो asset quality वहाँ पे भी is not that great. Coming to Paras Defense, so defense ancillaries continue to do well. We have seen orders coming in for BEL, HAL, as well as the other main defense companies. And these companies in turn give these orders to the component orders to companies such as Paras Defense, as also from the space sector, that orders that these companies receive. So yeah, remain positive on Paras Defense. CDSL, now again, this is a capital market play with exposure to the demat account industry. Now, if you see in the last few months, the addition of demat accounts, that pace has reduced as markets have corrected from the month of October and have become volatile. New investors, new demat account additions, that has stagnated a bit, and which impacts companies like CDSL because it is a major player in this space. Now, so capital market plays suggest to be a bit cautious. As the markets rally, naturally the demand will come back, but in the near term there could be some pressure. So advice is to first focus on the banks in the BFSI sector, and then gradually, as the markets also recover and the volatility subsides, say in the next 6 to 8 months at least, that would be a good time for CDSL. There is one question on PFC. So, Power Finance Corporation, again, these NBFCs which are focused on the infrastructure sector, that is PFC, REC, these companies traditionally were just focused on the power sector, but now they have been uh, opened up for the infrastructure sector overall. So, these companies can lend to metro projects या फिर जो भी major smart city projects है, in sub sectors ko now these companies are free to lend. So looking at the focus of the government on infrastructure, not just the center but as well as the state governments, every state is announcing major infrastructure projects. These companies are going to get the benefit of that. The loan book growth looks strong for these companies. Only thing is asset quality could worsen, but that would come later on in as the portfolio ages. But currently, yes, demand for these loan growth demand for these NBFCs looks strong. Another question on Tata Steel, Mazgaon Dock, and HAL. So Tata Steel, yes, if the safeguard duty materializes, naturally it will be positive for the company. However, this company is more exposed to the Europe market as well. And Europe में अगर steel prices correct होते हैं significantly, if there is dumping from China or overall Europe to US export अगर drop होते हैं because of these high tariffs, so there could be an impact. So a mixed view right now currently on Tata Steel, as also on Mazgaon Dock and HAL. So yes, defense companies are doing well. HAL का जो एक major overhang था with respect to the jet engines, वो अब GE से US से आना शुरू हुआ है, तो naturally the production rate of the fighter jets will increase, order execution will increase. Similar thing with Mazgaon Dock, sitting on a very large order book, and with Germany also increasing its defense spending, there is hope that these companies would also receive the export orders. But suggest entry in these stocks only with a long-term view, as orders will take time to execute. SBI Life, we cannot give a view due to compliance reasons. Coming to the next question on Zen Technologies. So yes, again, this is a defense ancillary company with exposure to the Indian anti-drone industry. The company has is also sitting on a large order book. So yes, as the your horizon has to be with a long-term horizon, as the valuations are rich and also the order book takes time to execute. So there is one more question on PNB housing. So yes, this company also is doing well in the housing finance space. It remains among the best companies currently doing well, and with the rate cycle also getting beneficial. So housing loans, especially in the affordable housing segment, those loans will get attractive, and we would see greater demand for the housing loan segment as well. So continue to remain positive on PNB housing as well. Yeah. We are almost done with the. It's almost 5 p.m. So if there are any questions, we'll take one or two more questions, or we'll exit. Yeah, so thank you everyone. Thank you for your wishes and comments as well. I hope the confusion relating to tariffs was solved by us. Thank you, Arnav, as well for explaining, especially on the pharma sector. Uh, the uncertainty is going to be there in the near term till the tariff uncertainty is there, until India negotiates a tariff deal with the US. There will be high volatility, but again, these are times to accumulate good quality stocks. Yeah, thank you and have a happy evening.